Hare Krishna, everybody. Thank you for coming. My name is Radha Dasi, and we're talking about Vaishnavi Leadership Lessons from Srimad Bhagavatam. And I apologize to anybody who was in my other seminar. I'm going to repeat some concepts, but hopefully it's a refresher for you and it's not, doesn't suck the life right out of you by being boring. And I also want to explain that this is not intended to be a lecture. I don't have answers, and I know that's frustrating for some people, but I don't have answers. I have a lot of questions. And this is really more an exercise in understanding how we understand what we're reading, how we can approach texts differently, based on different factors. And I'm really interested to hear what you all think. So as we go along, much better. Please. Okay. So we're going to be unpacking some stories, and that's an art, not a science. All right. What we're going to talk about. Oh, no, this is not on either now. Oh, yes. Turn it back on. There's a lesson in there somewhere, right? Every time we step back, we have to remember to recharge ourselves or something. I don't know. There's a Bhagavatam class in that example. Okay. So I'll just tell you what we're going to talk about, and either the slide will catch up with us or not. First, we're going to talk about narratives. Why we are interested in narrative at all, why that matters. There's plenty of texts that don't have any narrative. So, why is the Bhagavatam nothing but narrative? All right. Second, we're going to talk about what is leadership. Right? We're talking about Vaishnavi leaders, so what does that even mean? Then we will talk about Vaishnavis as leaders. And I've got 4 in this presentation, depending on time, because this is only an hour. We may get to all of them, we may not. You may have some that you want to discuss, so if anybody's got an idea, once we get through the first part of how we could approach a different text, that's fine. Okay, so the power of narrative. And this is a, graphic. The 6 most powerful words. Let me tell you a story. Stories are the very substance of what we are. So what does that mean? Stories are the substance of what we are, right? I'm just a story, No. It's that we interpret everything that happens and everything we do based on the stories we're telling ourselves, right? My brother and I have a younger brother. He's 9 years younger than I am. And we have this ongoing riff in our relationship that when I do something, I think, here is the benevolent older sister kindly doing something wonderful for her younger brother. That's my story, all right? His story is, here comes that controlling woman again. Right? So the activity is exactly the same. The story's different. The emotions are different. And therefore the experience is different. And objectivity, right, requires that our story be somewhat neutral. But as human beings, I can't say never, Krishna can do anything. But it's natural for us to have these stories we're telling ourselves. And so being aware of what story am I telling myself when I'm acting in the world or when I'm reading a text, that's important, right? Part of Krishna consciousness is we change the story that we're telling ourselves, right? I come to Krishna consciousness and my story is I am a lawyer. I am a mother. I am a wife. And by my potency, my family is well cared for. My children are protected. My clients get the results they're looking for. That's one story, right? And the other story is I'm a servant of Krishna. I really don't know very much. And somehow by Krishna's mercy, all these things are going on, So that's a change in consciousness, is a change in the story. There are a couple of things that can catch us up in life in general. Oh, I'm sorry. One more thing. Let's talk about the effects of using narratives. And this goes back to that question I asked earlier. Why does the Bhagavatam put so much emphasis on narrative, on story? It's easier to understand and remember when you bring a text to life, right? And we're told that the Mahabharata, texts like that are for women and Shudras who maybe didn't have the intellectual capacity to sit with straight philosophy, so we put it in a story. It's easier for people to understand. And in Kali Yuga, many of us, don't have that intellect that people in Satya Yuga may have had. So for all of us in Kali Yuga, using narratives is a great way to help us remember and understand. We want to change not just our minds, but our hearts. And something that we hear in a narrative can go deeper into our hearts than just a dry concept. Highlights and amplifies ideals, transmits culture, and creates a focus for participation. So we see Bhagavatam principles in action in the narratives that are in Srimad Bhagavatam. We see devotional service in action, and therefore we can identify with it more. We can think, how do I fit into that action? What kind of activity can I do this activity? And we pass along our values and our traditions to the next generation. Now, the thing to be aware of, and this is not just in reading texts, but in life, we all have our biases. We can't help it, we're human. So this says, unfortunately, this is how the brain works. And the little worker says, sir, we are receiving information that conflicts with the core belief system. And the boss says, get rid of it. Okay? And this is something called confirmation bias, right? That we tend to give more weight to information that is consistent with what we already believe. All right? And Facebook is a perfect example of this. The political polarization that is going on in many countries right now exemplifies this. All right? You have people telling two completely different versions of reality, diametrically opposed. And some people naturally believe this group, and some people naturally believe that group. My brother-in-law, God bless his heart, is a monk with the Self-Realization Fellowship. So we often have, kind of quasi-spiritual conversations, looking at the world through a spiritual lens. And he has a completely different political view than I do. So, he's kind of pushing one night, tell me why you think what you think. Come on, tell me. Just, I know we're family, it's politics, not a good idea, but, share it with me. And it was interesting that we both had exactly the same information, but I gave more weight to something over here, and he gave more weight to something over there. And so neither of us was ever going to convince the other, right? Because it had to do with what we brought to the table. All right. So what context, what biases, what context, what predispositions do we want to bring to the Bhagavatam? Okay. The first is, why are we reading Bhagavatam in the first place? What's the purpose of reading Srimad Bhagavatam? Radha for you. To learn to love Krishna. Okay. So in all our devotional activities, advancing in our spiritual consciousness, developing love for Krishna, surrendering, these are always the goals. So anything we look at in Bhagavatam, we have to look at through that lens. And Srila Prabhupada was fond of saying that, if you don't approach spiritual knowledge with the right frame of mind, you're going to be like somebody licking the outside of the jar of honey, but never tasting the sweetness, right? So the religious scholar may have much more knowledge of Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Bhagavad Gita than we do, right? They have studied these things much more deeply than we have in many times, but they don't become devotees. And that's because they approached this with the mood of, what can I pull out of this to write a paper on? It's a completely different approach. Their context for reading Srimad Bhagavatam is completely different. So we come with a devotional heart, all right? And then we also have to remember that we are looking for principles, right? Not details. When I just noticed giving these seminars, I keep saying when I was a young devotee. I'm like an old lady. When I was young, the world was different, so bear with me. But when I was young, we had a predilection, at least in North America, for the soda called 7-Up. 7-Up was the best soda. Anybody remember why? Because Prabhupada liked it. Yeah, Srila Prabhupada liked it. There is nothing inherently spiritual about 7-Up, despite what the ad campaign would try to tell you. That was the detail, and being younger, being, less experienced, we often focused on the details rather than the principle. Prabhupada took 7-Up that had been offered to Krishna. It was prasadam. That was the important point, and not, what particular brand of soda Prabhupada liked. So similarly, when we read the Bhagavatam, there are some things that are principles that we want to hold on to, but there are some things that are details, okay? So, well, I'll hold off on the example till we get to the text. All right. One of the biases that I want to focus on because of our particular topic is, how does our view of women influence what we're reading? Okay? So if I tell you women are the cause of fall down in men, women are unreliable and untrustworthy, what do we have? Hearts of the Foxes or something? I don't remember. I block these things out. But there are texts that, talk about women in sort of a negative way. All right? So that's going to color how we experience the narrative. All right? An older Indian national gentleman once told me that the reason why the Pandavas were exiled was because Draupadi was so rude in the assembly hall. For him, this story was about an unruly woman. And I was like you, outraged. How could, do you not listen to Prabhupada? What is, but when I stepped back for a moment, and my father's Chinese from China, so there's some of that traditional culture, and I thought, what would have happened if my mother had spoken to my uncles the way that Draupadi spoke in the assembly hall? And I could kind of understand how he could bring that context to the story, because it is, this is not the normal way that a woman in traditional culture speaks to anyone, unless she's a mother-in-law, then she can speak to her daughters-in-law. But normally women don't speak like that. It was kind of shocking. But if we set aside our experience in the material world and try to see the Bhagavatam with spiritual eyes, we come away with a different lesson. And it's one of the reasons why we are so blessed that Srila Prabhupada has provided such extensive commentaries, because we don't always know what the right context is. And so he defines that for us. All right, before we talk about leadership examples, we should talk about what is leadership, right? And leadership is not the same as management, okay? A good manager is also a leader, but a great leader may not be a manager at all. So I really like this definition by Dwight Eisenhower, who is a former president of the United States. Leadership is the art of getting someone to do something you want done because he wants to do it, right? So another way to say that is inspire, all right? A leader is someone who can inspire others, and in the Krishna conscious context, inspire others to do devotional service, to make spiritual advancement. So who can be a leader? Can you be a leader? Can you? Anyone can be a leader. And more importantly, everyone should be a leader, right? Srila Prabhupada says, spread this knowledge everywhere. Lord Chaitanya says, become a guru. Tell everyone you meet. So every one of us is a leader in some sense, and we can claim that because it's what we're supposed to be doing. So, let's lead. All right. But there are qualities that good leaders have. And this is kind of a summary, mostly from Forbes magazine. articles of different qualities that good leaders have. They have vision. They have enthusiasm. They have integrity. They're good communicators. They can empathize. They have humility. They're decisive. And then this one is one that Srila Prabhupada added. They have realization. All right. So that tells me a couple of things. One is that in order to be the leader that we are each called upon to be, we have to pay attention to our own spiritual realization. And that also affects the way that we see the sacred texts. How many have had the experience of reading something, say the Bhagavad Gita, at one point in your life, coming back to the same text a couple of years later, and it says something new? It's ever fresh. It's brand new, right? Okay. Has the Bhagavad Gita changed? We've changed. All right. So as we advance in consciousness, we will see more and more clearly the ultimate message that Krishna is telling us. All right. Now, having talked about what a leader looks like, how does a Vaishnavi compare? All right. So Vaishnavis inherently have qualities that may or may not be the same as the leadership qualities. Among women, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, I am fame, fortune, fine speech, memory, intelligence, steadfastness, and patience. Okay? And then, as we discussed in the other seminar, there are feminine traits that include surrender, and by that I mean, obedience, respect, tending to listen, empathy, being receptive, nurturing, affectionate, or same thing as nurturing. We share, we're community-oriented and relationship-oriented, so we care about what's happening with other people, and we're patient. Masculine traits, good qualities: independence, logic, confidence, strength, passion, discipline, and focus. And what I hope you see is that a good leader has to have qualities from both categories, right? And we'll just do this from memory. All right, a good leader is empathetic, right? Communicates well, is patient, but also has focus, discipline, is confident in making decisions, okay? So leadership is not for men or women, it's for everyone. And where does that leave us? Okay, and then Prabhupada, just emphasizing that Prabhupada asked us all to be leaders. Actually, I don't want to put anybody on the spot. Do you want to read that?
Anyone following the order of Lord Chaitanya, under the guidance of his bona fide representative, can become a spiritual master. And I wish that in my absence, all my disciples become the bona fide spiritual master to spread Krishna consciousness throughout the whole world.
And Mataji, would you read the other quotation, please? Okay, so who would like to read the other quotation? Someone within my arm's reach would be great. Thank you.
As far as Krishna consciousness is concerned, everyone is capable of becoming a spiritual master, because knowledge in Krishna consciousness is on the platform of the spirit soul. The word guru is equally applicable to the Vartma, Padarshaka guru, Shiksha guru, and Diksha guru. Unless we accept the principle enunciated by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, this Krishna consciousness movement cannot spread all over the world.
All right, so again, we are called to be leaders. This is what Srila Prabhupada wants. And so then we have to talk about, this is about Vaishnavis, right? So what does a Vaishnavi leader look like? And I'm going to posit that a Vaishnavi leader doesn't need to look the same way a male leader does. In fact, she probably shouldn't, because we already have male leaders. We don't need to replace them, right? So Vaishnavis bring something different to the table, right? What does a Vaishnavi leader look like? So the first example is from Canto 1 of the Bhagavatam, and the chapter is the son of Drona punished, all right? So if you remember the setup, we've had the battle of Kurukshetra, the Pandavas have won, Ashvatam, the son of Drona, is, he just can't accept this, and so his solution is to kill Draupadi and Arjuna's children. Heinous activity, unforgivable, right? And Arjuna, gives the vow that he's going to bring Draupadi Ashvatam's head. He goes out, captures Ashvatam, and then, like a Pandava, he becomes a little soft-hearted, so he doesn't actually cut off the head, right? Krishna tells him, because Krishna's there, you made this promise. You said you were going to, bring Draupadi his head, and, according to the moral codes, he should be killed. So, what are you doing here, Arjuna? You should kill him. Krishna has given an instruction, all right? So is that instruction immediately carried out? No. Okay, wait, what? Krishna gave an instruction, and now we're going to have a timeout? How is this? Why is this? Right? But they go back to the martial camp, and now we have a Pandava council, right? And who's present there that wasn't present on the battlefield? Right? Draupadi, right? And her viewpoint, here's the thing, Krishna has given an instruction. And not only are we going to discuss it, but we want to hear what Draupadi thinks. Why do we want to hear what Draupadi thinks? She's part of the equation, right? And she brings something to the table that no one else will say, So if you recall, she comes up with some considerations that to her militate against killing Ashvatam, right? Does anybody remember what they are? Radha?
She doesn't want Ashvatam's mother to experience the same pain and suffering from the loss of her son that she experienced.
Okay, so
She understands how devastating that is.
She's saying, I know what it's like to lose children. I just lost mine, and I don't want another woman to feel like that. That's compassion. Compassion not for Ashvatam, but for his mother, right? So that's part of that feminine perspective, right? Anything else anybody can remember? Yes, Prabhu. Ashvatam is the son of a Brahmin. We're Kshatriyas. Will disturb the social order if a Kshatriya kills him. So there's that community focus on relationships and how the whole community fits together, right? Anything else? Okay. I'm sure we could come up with more, but the other thing that sticks in my mind is she says, look, this is the son of someone to whom we owe everything. Right? Drona was your guru, right? And it is said that a man lives through his son. So if you kill Ashvatam, it's like killing Drona all over again, right? And how despicable of us to be ungrateful, right? And gratitude is one of those qualities that tends to be associated with the feminine, okay? So, on the one hand, for me anyway, this story is about how important the feminine voice is in society, right? But on the other hand, it shows leadership in a particular way, simply by being in the conversation and bringing ideas to the table that no one else has considered, okay? So, and the important thing is this leadership, it wasn't like somebody voted her in or gave her a promotion or signed off on her record so she had the ability to open her mouth. No. Okay? This was something that she was expected to do. This was something that was welcomed and desired. And ultimately, Krishna tells you, Arjuna, you've got to balance all of these considerations. Bhishma says, kill him. I say, kill him. Yudhishthira and Draupadi say no. You've got to satisfy everyone. Right? Again, emphasizing that Draupadi's point of view is extremely important. And, being a Pandava, being Arjuna, he comes up with a solution. So he cuts the hair, so he's humiliated, he's in one sense dead, but he's still alive. Okay. Any thoughts or comments on anything we've talked about so far? No? Okay, so we'll move on from here. Maybe, if I can do this. Okay. Devahuti. This is actually a very interesting one for me personally. When I was a young devotee, like I said, I'm the old lady, but when I first came to Krishna consciousness, and I grew up in the West, I grew up in the 70s, so this was a time when the feminist movement was, going strong, and they had this mantra that, I can do anything a man can do, plus I can do everything that a woman can do. I'm superwoman, I'm exhausted, and I'm dying from overwork, but, I can do it all, right? And so I'm trying to understand, how does a Vaishnavi behave? What's a Vaishnavi like, right? And I was told, Devahuti is an example, an excellent example, ideal woman, right? So I go and I read this, I read this text. And what I took away is that the ideal woman is a wife and a mother, right? So far, so good, because I wanted to do both of those things. And she accepts whatever situation her husband puts her in, and it reinforced for me the messages that I was getting about Vaishnavi behavior in terms of chastity, obedience, submission, and messages that said you stand in the back of the temple room. You don't give class, you don't speak in public, right? You don't ask for things because you're learning to be humble, right? And none of these messages are wrong, okay? None of these messages are wrong. But what I will say is that's not the whole story, right? That's just one piece of it. So coming to Devahuti's story later, I saw something different, all right? And it was a real eye-opening experience for me. So let's just kind of recap the story. Who is Devahuti? Somebody want to give us like a thumbnail, quick, please? Okay, she's the mother of Kapila, wife of Kardama Muni, okay? And so what's her marriage to Kardama Muni like? Let's maybe make the question more specific. What is her marriage like?
Madhu's daughter married to a poor Brahmana.
Okay, so she's the offspring of this highly exalted, great position, opulence, and wealth personality, and she's married to a poor Brahmin, right? So big change in social status, but she just accepts it, right? Ideal, surrendered, great message, right? The emphasis on protection, is always there. No matter how we talk about Vaishnavis or what texts we're reading, it's always emphasized. Vaishnavis need to be protected. And in this particular section of the Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada emphasizes that a lot. So again, who are our natural protectors, right? Shout it out, you know it, you were in the other seminar. Husband, son, father, right? Okay, so she went straight from her father's home, right, to her husband's home, and then what happened? The husband left, right? Okay, but she had the son, right? The son stayed, so she was protected. And this is the ideal path, according to the temple authorities I was learning from. This is the ideal path for a woman. But then something else happens, right? When Kardama Muni leaves, Kapila shares spiritual knowledge with his mother, right? And why is that important, all right? Because this knowledge is meant for everyone. Srila Prabhupada, specifically tells us that this was Kapila's mission. He came to this world in order to impart this message. So to whom did he impart it? To his mother, to a Vaishnavi, right? And she's a perfect woman, right? But she's also the perfect student, right? We recognize and remember her because she submitted to her husband. She took the instructions of her son to heart, right? And executed them. At the end of the pastime, it said that, she's perfectly realized, okay? And in some sense, like, you could approach this story with the viewpoint that, if Kapila's instructions will work for a woman, well, gosh, they must work for anyone, right? And in Kali Yuga, we're all particularly fallen, so that's good news. But there's another piece to the story, right? What happens after he imparts the wisdom? What happens next? He leaves, right? Oops, what just happened here? You know, Kapila is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Did he violate Dharma when he left his mother? Was she unprotected at that point? Tell me yes or no. You know, whatever you think. I'm open. Yes.
No, she's not unprotected because she remained physically in the ashram of her husband and she remained protected by the instructions which were spiritual in nature.
Okay. So she remained in the ashram, and I'm going to submit that's the social order. You know, we got the social part handled. But this is the real key, right? She was protected by spiritual knowledge. Okay? And that is how Srila Prabhupada protected his Vaishnavi disciples in many ways. Okay? It's not, in a traditional society, it may not be common for women to go out into the public sphere on their own, right? Sometimes we understand that protection of the father, husband, son to mean that, you know, they need to be overseeing us at all times, and everything we do needs to be sanctioned, you know, directly sanctioned by them. But that's not how Srila Prabhupada operated, right? He asked his disciples to go out into new territory, right? And he sent ladies out into new territory. Vaishnavis who were in India with Srila Prabhupada were told to go to another city where they'd never been, didn't speak the language maybe, and organize to preach, to organize programs, right? So was Srila Prabhupada leaving his daughters unprotected? You know, no. They were protected by each other and by his instructions, right? Yes.
I think I'm not wrong. As far as I remember, when I read the story for the first time, the first thing that I thought and felt that was very, very important is that there is one verse when it says that Devahuti has the same qualities as Kardama Muni. She's as beautiful as he is, she's as intelligent as he is, and she has the same character, same qualities in terms of emotions and psychology. I think that is very, very important. So they were very, very similar.
Thank you for sharing that, because you're right. That is very, very important. And that's something that completely passed me by, you know. But again, this idea that, I don't know a way to say this. I don't want to, the only thing that I can come up with is a legal phrase of separate but equal, right? In other words, there may be a male sphere and a female sphere, but they're complementary, right? Kardama Muni and Devahuti are complementary. It's not that he's inherently more spiritual than she is. You know, it's not that he's inherently more capable of making advancement or spreading Krishna consciousness than she is, right? So here we see the Vaishnavi in a leadership role by doing what? What is her greatest accomplishment here? Self-realization. She becomes self-realized. You know, she hears. She's the ideal student, right? And again, that ideal student is a Vaishnavi and not a Vaishnava. Okay. All right. And just to reinforce this again, this was Kapila's message. So in Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, the text says, Sri Maitreya said, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Kapila, after instructing his beloved mother, took permission from her and left his home, his mission having been fulfilled. Purport. The mission of the appearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the form of Kapila was to distribute the transcendental knowledge of Sankhya philosophy, which is full of devotional service. Having imparted that knowledge to his mother, and through his mother to the world, Kapila Dev had no more need to stay at home, so he took permission from his mother and left. And that last line, he took permission from his mother and left, that also escaped me, on first, second, third readings of this. So again, we sometimes have this like snapshot picture of what we think Vaishnavi behavior is like, but it's more nuanced, right? The mother was obedient to the husband and to the son, and at the same time, the son is also asking her permission. There's a great deal of reciprocity, of reciprocation in Vaishnava relationships. Anybody have any comments or questions at this point? Yes, Radha Govinda, Prabhu, loudly, please. Okay, good point. Good point. So we're looking at these Vaishnavis, they are our role models, right? And one of the things that we're learning through Devahuti, as Radha Govinda says, is she asked for what she wanted. She expressed her needs. She had daughters. Kardama Muni was getting ready to leave, and she says, wait, I would like to have a son so that I'm protected. Please wait until I have a son. And a lot of times, not just as Vaishnavis, but as women in general, we feel like there's something wrong if we advocate for ourselves. We feel like maybe it's wrong of us to have needs, or wrong of us to express those needs, or maybe sometimes we think that, our husband should just know what we need and we shouldn't have to say it out loud, right? And Devahuti is modeling for us this behavior that, yes, it's okay to have a need, and yes, you can express it. And then, we get the reciprocation. So we can learn a lot of things from these texts if we're paying attention to the details. Anything else anybody wants to add? Okay. All right, now we're at my favorite Vaishnavi, Sati Devi. So I'm tired of telling stories. Who wants to tell Sati's story? Who wants to start us off? I'm going to pick a volunteer.
I may not do a good job of this, so please feel free to correct me later. Sati was the daughter of Daksha. She was married to Lord Shiva. And the short version is, Lord Shiva was insulted by Daksha, wasn't invited to a sacrifice. Sati wanted to go because she wanted to see her mother and her sisters. Lord Shiva said, you really, you weren't invited. Well, I'm going to go anyway. So she goes, her father insults her. So now he's insulted her husband and herself, and she gets very angry and immolates herself in protest. Says, enough. You don't like, you bore my body came from yours, and you've disrespected me. I have no use for this body. So she left her body, and things went on from there.
Thank you. Excellent. So is Sati a positive role model, somebody we want to be like, or is she a negative role model, behavior we should avoid? How many think positive? Raise your hands. You're not accountable for this. No one's going to remember who raised their hand. Okay, so how many think she's a negative role model? Okay, so we got some positive, no negative. Most of you are not really sure what I'm talking about, right? Okay. Okay. I read this in the beginning as the negative role model, right? Here's a woman who, got into the middle of a dispute between her husband and her father, always dicey, right? And is that appropriate? Should a Vaishnavi get in the middle of her relatives' wrangles? Is that a good idea? Is that proper Vaishnavi behavior? Well, we'll leave. Is it? I don't know. I'm asking. Okay. So maybe it is. If it's needed. I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said. If it's needed. Okay. So maybe it is. Yeah. Could be. But here's the thing. Her husband gave her advice. And what did she do? She ignored it. Okay, so here's, my immature understanding. Ignore your husband's advice, you get burned in a fire. Right? Okay. So, then I got married, I married a devotee. And suddenly, the idea of following every piece of advice, every instruction he gave me, what to speak of every piece of advice. And I'm kind of like, oh, I think I'm staring into some flames here because I just can't do this, right? So, but coming back to the story, and kind of processing it over the years, there's something else going on here. So one of the things that's happening is there is an injustice. An injustice has happened in the community, right? Was Daksha properly offended that Shiva didn't stand up? Because this is the thing. Daksha, who is a great, exalted personality, self-illuminating, we can't imagine how high up he is. He comes into the arena and everybody stands up to offer him obeisances, except Lord Shiva, right? So can we understand how Daksha would be offended, right? My son-in-law disrespected me. I mean, I don't know how it is with the demigods, but I know in our societies, fathers can be a little touchy about their son-in-laws disrespecting them, right? So he's offended, right? And not only is he offended, but the pastime explains how this disruption, this social disruption, spreads very quickly, right? At that first sacrifice, the followers of Daksha and the followers of Shiva are exchanging curses. It's a mess, right? So now comes, the second sacrifice, and Sati sees all the people going to her father's house, right? And she wants to go, and she does the very wifely thing. She says to Lord Shiva, if you want to go, we could go, okay? And for the gentlemen in the room, you may already know this, but when your wife says, if you want to, that means she wants to, okay? All right, so she wanted to go. She politely let her husband know, and he says, not a good idea, right? And reminds her, and this is an important lesson for us as Vaishnavis and Vaishnavas, that the unkind words of a relative hurt so much more than the unkind words of anyone else, right? The people we're closest to have the power to hurt us the most, all right? But Sati wants to go anyway, and Prabhupada does say at one point, it's because she's a woman. She wants to go and see her mothers. Naturally, your family's gathering, everybody's showing off their nice saris and, big diamonds or whatever it is that your social circle happens to prize, right? And of course she wants to go. But there's a deeper reason. She also wants to save her father, all right? She's got this love for her father, of course, what daughter doesn't? And she knows who Lord Shiva is, and she knows the danger of offending him, right? So Prabhupada says in a later purport that the main reason she wanted to go was so that she could tell her father what he needed to hear and hopefully change his mind, right? And that's exactly what she does, right? So here again, we have another woman in a public assembly, right? And she's gonna chastise somebody in public, her father, I don't know about your father, but if I had ever corrected my father in public, it would have been, not only would it have been very bad for me, but his heart would have been so hurt, right? You may say something to your father in private, but she's calling him out in a public assembly, You don't know who Shiva is. You don't understand what you're doing, right? And then there's this piece where she describes what we should do when we hear blasphemy, right? We should block our ears and go away. We should cut out the offender's tongue, or we should give up our body. We should leave our body, right? And again, I have to emphasize that as it was emphasized before, I'm not recommending you do any of those things except go away, right? Going away is still on the table in Kali Yuga. Cutting out tongues and leaving your body, that's for a different age, okay? But not only does she impart this information, right? But then she models it, right? She goes ahead and says, you know, I came from your body. Your behavior is so awful. Not, you know, this is not a temper tantrum. This is not, I can't stand being related to you because, you know, you're just so, you know, disgusting. This is, you have done something so terrible that this is my only recourse, okay? And what is the community response to Sati's behavior? They're horrified, you know? If you look at the pastime, because again, I came to this with a very immature mind at the beginning. I still have an immature mind, but it was very immature then. And what I got out of it was, you know, the unruly woman has to be chastised. And I glossed right over the fact that everybody in the assembly, once Sati has immolated herself, everyone there begins to criticize whom? Daksha. Nobody's saying, look at this out of control girl. They're all saying, Daksha, you should not have been so harsh. You should not have behaved this way. Okay. So what we're seeing here is a fantastic leadership model, right? There's compassion. She's putting herself at risk of being hurt. Shiva told her, you know, no one can hurt you like your family. So she's taking this risk. She's going in public because she wants to help her father, right? And she's speaking truth to power, right? This is something that as devotees can be very complicated for us, right? Because respect, right? Obedience. That's not just for Vaishnavis. You know, Vaishnavas, it's not okay for you to challenge your authorities. You know, you don't go to your spiritual master and say, Guru Maharaj, that's wrong, right? You know, but sometimes speaking truth to power is necessary. Daksha was the authority, you know, but he needed to be corrected. So Sati shows us courage, right? Compassion, courage, and she does it in a respectful way. That, you know, a lot of times when we're unsatisfied with someone's behavior or we think somebody in authority is not carrying out their duties properly, it's very easy to want to attack the person, right? But Sati stays very focused on, you know, the issue, which is who is Lord Shiva? Not, Dad, you're so stupid, you know, just like all of that kind of ad hominem attack. She doesn't do that. You know, she lays out, this is reality. This is a reality check, Dad, you know. So giving him the opportunity, speaking truth to power. And then when she's not heard, she didn't go out and make a YouTube video and post it for the whole world to see, right? That's what we do nowadays. She didn't go on Facebook and go on a rant, right? She said, look, this is the proper behavior as defined in the scriptures, and that's what she did. So I find Sati to be a very inspiring and powerful example of how Vaishnavis can lead. Okay. We have about 10 minutes left. So are there questions at this point? Comments? Okay. The last example is Kunti. All right. So I'm tired. I'm not doing this anymore. Who wants to tell us how Kunti is a leader? Okay, I'm going to pick somebody if I get no volunteers. All righty. And remember, there's no wrong answers here because we're trying to unpack the story together. So give it a shot.
I'm not really good at storytelling, but I'll try. Kunti being the wife of King Pandu, he left his body at a very early age. She got this boon of the benediction of getting sons from the demigods, which she got Arjuna, Yudhishthir, I'm blank now, Bhima, Arjuna, and Nakul and Sahadev. And she actually underwent a lot of struggles in her life, and she dealt with all those really powerfully with prayers, knowing that Krishna was by her side.
Yeah, so Kunti's also a mother, right? A lot of the women, most of the women in the Bhagavatam are mothers. And there's one experience that for me crystallized something that I, as a younger devotee, didn't grasp. How did Draupadi come to have 5 husbands? First of all, is that bona fide? Are we meant to imitate that? Yeah, no, probably not. No, okay. That's a detail, not a principle. Arjuna, the Pandavas go to the Swayambara. Arjuna wins Draupadi's hands. They come in and say, "Mother, look what we've gotten today, what we've won." And she says, "Whatever it is, share it between yourselves." Right? Okay. So if that happened in my life, there is no way my kids. I mean, I could give my kids a candy bar and say share and share alike, and they wouldn't do it. Right? Okay, so the Pandavas, in one sense, were kind of like, why didn't they just say, "Hey, no, Ma, you don't understand. This is not something we can share, okay?" And she just changes her instruction, okay? But her words, she was so truthful. Her words could not prove false, right? And she was their mother. She had given an instruction. And this shows you how seriously they took their mother's guidance. We say that a Vaishnav should see all women except his wife as a mother, right? And then, at least for me, I bring my material understanding of what a mother is, right? And try to apply it in that context. Okay, another story. I like to tell stories. There was a brahmachari at our temple when I was a young devotee again. And one day, the temple, we had a phone and people answered it. Answer the phone, it's his mother. So someone goes to tell him, your mother's on the phone. He doesn't come. The person goes back, he doesn't come. Finally, they drag him to the phone, and he's pissed. He's angry because he doesn't want to talk to his mother. He doesn't like his mother. He's been avoiding his mother. That's why she's calling the temple, right? And for many of us, this is how we see mother, She's the one who makes the rules. She's the one, especially when we're teenagers, right? She's the one who's always spoiling our fun. She's the one who has expectations we can't meet. And when we were young devotees and our parents weren't devotees, she's in Maya. She's a demon, right? But from the Pandavas, we understand the importance of motherhood and how much the mother is the leader, right? That's really the lesson that I took from Kunti's saying, share and share alike, was that the mother's instructions were very valuable, okay? And I just want to end on this note, that all of this means, as Vaishnavis, we have to take our spiritual lives very, very seriously. Sometimes there's a tendency to think, well, if my husband is making advancement in Krishna consciousness, it's all good, right? I'm serving him, he's making advancement. We don't have to worry so much. But if you're raising children, unless your husband's going to do the hands-on, which sometimes men do, but if you're going to be the one who's, interacting with them on a daily basis for extended periods of time, what are you going to teach them, right? If you don't have firm, solid sadhana, if you don't have firm, solid understanding, right? And we model for them and for the rest of the community, because we are role models, that we are always seeking, wherever we are always seeking to make even more advancement. That making advancement, deepening our realization, becoming Krishna conscious, this is a lifelong practice. When I first came to the temple, I really wanted to be a saint. All my life, from a small child, when I first read about the saints, I wanted to be a saint. I'm not saint material, that was obvious from a small child. But when I met the devotees and I decided to take this practice seriously, I'm thinking, okay, 5 years, maybe 10 years at the outside. I can become saintly, maybe not 100%, but I can at least become saintly in that period of time. Well, it's been more like 30 years. And I'm not where I started, right? There's some advancement there, but, saintly qualities are I can see them from here at least. Okay. But, that's what we can bring, right? As mothers of the community, not just mothers of our own children. As mothers of the community, we have something to share, right? And sometimes we have to speak truth to power, right? And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, a Vaishnavi is the right person to do that, right? Sati was the right person to speak to Daksha because she was his daughter. Fathers have some affection for their daughters. She could get into the house in the first place or into the sacrifice in the first place because she was his daughter. So we have this opportunity, all right? Let's not be, lazy, indifferent. Don't be too shy, Don't be too insecure about your own abilities so that you don't speak up when you can, that you don't share your realizations. We all have realizations. And Vaishnavis so often hold on to their realizations and don't share them because somehow we think, it'd be puffed up or be inappropriate or we're just shy, But challenge yourself, Anyway, I could go on and on. There's a couple minutes left. I just want to see if anybody else has a question or comment. I think y'all are terribly patient, because I've just been yammering and, you're still here. So, all right. Thank you all so very much for your kind attention. Hare Krishna.